nasal cannula, and nasal intermittent mandatory ventilation. So what is NIV? Simply NIV means ventilation without endotracheal intubation. And if you really want to be scientifically right, we would say administration of positive pressure support using a flow register or a positive pressure generator without the use of laryngeal or a tracheal interface. And that is how you define non-invasive ventilation. Now coming to the details of triple HFNC, what does it mean? Simply first H is heated, second H is humidified, HF is high flow, a flow which is more than 2 liters per minute. It's a blended gas mixture of air and oxygen, and nasal cannula. Now going into the details, these are basically small, thin, tapered binasal tubes that deliver oxygen or blended oxygen and air mixture at rates which is more than 2 liters per minute. This form of NIV specifically refers to delivery of blended heated humidified gas, and high flow nasal cannula became popular because of its use. So from 2013 until 2016-17, lots of units moved away from using CPAP to high flow for varieties of reasons like ease of use, simple interfaces. It was perceived as nurses friendly. There was less nasal trauma. It improved parent-baby bonding, easy to do kangaroo mother care. Oral feeding was possible while high-flow nasal cannula was being given, and it just looked better. So cosmetically also looked better. How does it work? Actually, if you go through the details, it is just like a CPAP works. So there is washout of the nasopharyngeal dead space. There is increase in the inspiratory resistance. Chest wall is splinted. There is a stability to the chest wall. Breathing becomes easy. That's why there is reduced work of breathing. And there is generation of distending pressure. And we'll talk about this pressure in a short while. Recruitment of collapsed alveoli and establishment of FRC. And there is also distension of collapsed alveoli. So pretty much just like your CPAP works, the high flow is supposed to be working. Now the question is, does high flow generate PEEP? And the answer is yes. The only thing is that you don't know consistently at what liters how much pressure will be generated, because the results from various study, when you plot on the graph, they look very different. And what you would usually find is that with increasing the flow, there is increase in the pressure. And generally, suppose the flow is 4 liter and roughly you can -1 from that, that would be the pressure roughly generated, but there can be lots of variation. So the problem with high flow is that the PEEP is not set, PEEP is not measured, and PEEP is not regulated, and they are only estimated. Now coming to contraindications, they are same like what you do for CPAP. If there are upper airway anomalies, if there are nasal anomalies, tracheoesophageal fistula, unoperated case of diaphragmatic hernia, nasal obstruction, severe cardiovascular instability, severity of the shock, poor respiratory efforts, and frequent apneas, all of these are considered contraindications for use of high flow nasal cannula. Now, what are the different devices available? So we all are familiar with our standard nasal cannula where we deliver flows of 1 to 2 liters, and we have an option of going ahead. But then if you use higher flow, we are not using humidification and we are not warming it. So there is a lot of risk of causing damage to the respiratory mucosa. Vapotherm device flow you can give from 5 to 40 liter and give to as much as 100% relative humidity. The gas is heated anywhere between 33 to 43 degrees. We were all familiar with bubble CPAP system of Fisher-Paykel, and if you just connect the front end of the inspiratory limb to a OptiFlow nasal cannula, we can use that as a high flow nasal cannula. You can give flow from 1 to 60 liters and 100% humidity is possible. Usually gas is heated at about 37 degrees. The newer version of Fisher-Paykel device called Airvo 2, There, it can be used in all age groups from newborn to pediatric to the geriatric. And what you are seeing here is a Vapotherm device. Now, how do you use high flow nasal cannula? You must maintain a leak at the nose when the cannula is fitted. We need to fit a orogastric tube so that the abdomen remains decompressed. There is no distension of the stomach and the gastrointestinal system. And you need to position tubing down and away from the baby. When you are putting the prongs inside, it should not be tightly fitting. And when you actually take the rounds, you have to make sure that there is a gap like what you are seeing here, not like this. And like we round every day, we have to take rounds of these babies by keeping nose in the mind, specifically look at the nose. We also need to make sure, as said earlier, that prong size should be approximately 50% size of the nares. So the egress of the gas is possible through the open nares. High flow nasal cannula is an open system, so the leaks are allowed. Unlike CPAP, which is a closed system where the leak is not there except from the expiratory limb. So these are varieties of devices. This is Fisher-Paykel's high flow device. Then you have this Hamilton system, and you have this Air O2 system. Earlier we used to get this big thick tube, and now for newborn use we are starting to get different types of tubes. Now, how do you set up the high flow, and how do you actually wean? So you would start with a flow of somewhere between 6 to 8 liter, and if the baby's distress is not settling, then you may increase the flow by 1 liter to maximum up to 8 liter per minute. And FiO2 you'll start with 30 and maybe increase as required to as much as 50% or so. Once the baby is stable, then when you are weaning, you need to wean FiO2 before the weaning the flow, and you would get your flow somewhere close to 25% or so before you actually start weaning the high flow. The gas is administered at a temperature of 34 to 37 degree with 100% relative humidity. Now, one of the questions that we were not sure, how do you start the flow? We start with a lower flow or higher flow. And this was a study just published this February from our unit, where actually we compared the two different flow rates. Low flow, the standard flow was 5 to 7 liter, and the higher flow was 8 to 10 liter, and then looked at whether the failures are different. So the failure rate in the higher flow group was 22% compared to the standard flow, which was 29%, statistically not significant. But the increments in the flow that you have to do from 5 to 6 to 7 or from 8 to 9 to 10 were significantly lower in the higher flow group, 43% in the higher flow group versus 64%, which basically means that if you start with the flows of somewhere about 8 or 9, you don't have to do too many adjustments in the flows. But we need to select babies carefully because these are all babies who are like 28 weeks or higher in gestation. Whenever we hear these debates, and unfortunately we missed Dr. Murki's talk today because of the shortness of the time, but the CPAP and high flow once were the topics of debate, and you would find both the speakers talking fondly about how one is superior over other, and the points to argue our always CPAP is a well-established standard therapy, is the standard of care, and we are reliably delivering the pressure, which is more important for recruiting the premature lung. Both basically they may be working similarly when you are using in the secondary mode, but primary mode there are controversies. Nasal injury may be less, but high flow is not free from nasal injury if not monitored. KMC can be done in high flow, so is it can be done in CPAP. But with the high flow, there may be a longer duration of oxygen requirements, and we'll see a little bit of this shortly. So even the babies on high flow, if not monitored properly, if we are not monitoring, like doing the nose rounds, we can have minor, moderate, and severe nasal injuries. And KMC can be done either with CPAP or high flow easily without any problem. This was one of the study which was collaborated from Fernandez by Dr. Murki and our hospital, where we looked at use of high flow as a primary respiratory support for preterm babies with respiratory distress who are more than 28 weeks. So these babies were on average about 32 weeks gestation and about 1600 grams. And we defined failure in this study as those babies who in the high flow group require more than 7 liters per minute, or in the CPAP group requiring more than 7 centimeters of pressure. Along with this, one has to be there like FiO2 more than 60, pH less than 7.2, CO2 more than 60, increase in the Silverman-Anderson score by 2, recurrent apnea, shock with severe metabolic acidosis with base excess more than -10. And those infants who failed in the nasal CPAP group went on to mechanical ventilation, and those who were in the high flow group went on to mechanical ventilation. Those went on to the CPAP first, and if required, on to the mechanical ventilation. And what we found was that the failure rate in the nasal CPAP group was 7.9% versus in the high flow group 26.3%, which clearly suggesting that we need to really think in this particular population that nasal CPAP should remain the first therapy of choice. Although having said that, the rates of intubation and mechanical ventilation were not statistically significantly different between the two study groups. The results of HIPSTAR study published around the same time were pretty much the same. Failure rate in the high flow group 25.5% versus in the CPAP group 13.3%. This was one of the very interesting retrospective review of database of 1,000 neonatal units in US called Aerial Neonatal Network, where they looked at retrospective chart review at babies who are less than 1 kilo, about 2,500 of them. And what they actually looked at is that those who received CPAP alone, those who received high flow alone, and those who received high flow failed and then went on to CPAP. And what actually they found is that those who were managed with CPAP or high flow, they had increased risk of morbidity and hospital stay, more risk of BPD, and more risk of BPD and death. Basically suggesting that, although this is not a randomized trial, but basically suggesting that especially in less than 1 kilo babies, CPAP should be the first choice all the time. Another interesting study published from Australia showed that when you use high flow nasal cannula for the management of babies who are on average about 1 kilo, the duration of requirement of oxygen is approximately 1 day higher in the high flow cannula group, and the time of discharge is approximately 10 days more as compared to the CPAP group, suggesting that for less than 1 kilo, again, you should be using CPAP as the first choice. Now going through the Cochrane review, high flow nasal cannula, and what actually it shows that no difference in the rates of BPD when high flow is compared with CPAP. There is less nasal trauma and less air leak. And some of the studies which looked at those babies who are ventilated and ready to extubate, those who got randomized like that, actually in that situation, no difference in the rates of death, no difference in the rates of chronic lung disease, no difference in the treatment failure or re-intubation, which means if the baby is ventilated and is ready to extubate, whether you go for high flow or CPAP, especially if they are more than 28 weeks, it doesn't really matter. But as a primary mode, it does matter. CPAP remains the first choice. Data with high flow in extremely preterm babies who are less than 28 weeks, especially less than 26 weeks, is very limited. And of all the available devices, which of the high flow device is better, we don't know. Nowadays, almost all the ventilators are having use of high flow as additional option. I had opportunity to review literature recently, and I was surprised to see this systematic review just published a month ago. And actually, these are the authors from France, where they looked at all the studies published until last year. And basically, they said that this meta-analysis shows that the failure rates are higher in the high flow group as compared to the CPAP group. Okay. But look at the interesting interpretation of the same literature, how we interpret and how they interpret. So what this study adds is there is a significant higher risk of treatment failure using high flow nasal cannula compared with CPAP for primary respiratory support in preterm infants. There is no difference in intubation rates and lower rates of nasal trauma using high flow cannula compared with CPAP for primary respiratory support in preterm infants. Now, what is their conclusion? Despite a higher risk of treatment failure, considering no difference in the intubation rates, they are not talking about the failure, they are talking about actually how many go on ventilator, and a lower rate of nasal trauma using high flow compared with CPAP, which suggests that high flow should be used as a primary respiratory support in preterm infants. Although all of us do not agree with this, but how the same study can be interpreted in many different ways by many people, that was what I wanted to highlight here. So in summary, what are the benefits of high flow? Easy to use, perceived tolerance, initial treatment of RDS. It can be used in babies who are 28 weeks or higher, but the risk of failure is there higher than that when used with CPAP. Post-extubation, they are equally effective. Less yearly laser trauma may be less gaseous distension, and maybe better feed tolerance. Disadvantages that the pressure is variable, unmeasured, unpredictable, unmonitored. There is insufficient evidence to establish its effectiveness in the extremely low birth weight babies, and the failure rates are higher as compared to the CPAP. That ends the first part of my talk, and then now we go to NIMV. Now the question is that why do we, when CPAP is so good, why do we need to think about invasive ventilation? The reason is CPAP does not consistently improve ventilation and does not work in infants with poor respiratory effort. So somebody is always going to fail when you are doing CPAP. And these are the group of the babies where actually you need to go on to invasive ventilation. 40 to 60% babies with RDS may fail CPAP, and 25 to 40% of intubated low birth weight babies may fail extubation and may need reintubation. So this is invasive ventilation. Then coming to why we think about non-invasive ventilation. Endotracheal intubation is the single most important major preventable factor contributing to the development of BPD, and BPD is a nightmare for all neonatologists. As we say, smaller and sicker babies, even we are facing many babies in the units are stuck on the some or other kind of respiratory support, especially those who are born below 26 weeks. Even a single positive pressure ventilation breath can cause biotrauma, barotrauma, valutrauma, atelectotrauma, reotrauma, etc., etc. And this all leads to ventilation-induced lung injury. So NIMV is a bridge between CPAP and invasive ventilation. So those who fail CPAP, you can try NIMV as a first thing. And if that does not work, then you may need to go on to the full-scale invasive ventilation. NIV is a very broad term, and broadly you can classify as a CPAP, CIPAP or BiPAP or biphasic CPAP, which is more like CPAP only. You have NIPPV, which is more like invasive mechanical ventilation without endotracheal tube. You have nasal high frequency ventilation, and also the high flow cannula, and the NAVA is also considered as one of the modes of non-invasive ventilation. Now, what is NIMV or NIPPV? Interchangeably used term. So you have a CPAP in the background or continuous descending pressure in the background. On the top of it, you have a inspiratory phase that is superimposed. So positive pressure cycle delivered on the top of CPAP by nasal route. NIMV or NIPPV is an effort to support ventilation and avoid the need for invasive support using IPPV via nasal devices. When it is used in a synchronized manner by using the different kinds of sensors like Grasby capsule, it is called SNIMV or SNIPPV, and neurally adjusted ventilator assist. We just not going to touch base on this, but remember that this is also a part of non-invasive ventilation. All the indication that you consider for high flow, CPAP, or mechanical ventilation invasive form are indications for NIMV, like primary support of RDS, transient tachypnea, meconium, pneumonia, CCF, pulmonary edema, PDA, apnea of prematurity, prevention and treatment. It can be used in the delivery room, primary support to provide positive pressure ventilation. It can be used post-extubation respiratory support and post-aspirative respiratory support as well. Contraindication, very much similar like CPAP, infants with unoperated diaphragmatic hernia, nasal obstruction, nasal anomalies, tracheoesophageal fistula, or immediate post-operative period post-GI surgery. There are varieties of interfaces which are used, and they will include the nasal mask or binasal prongs or Hudson's binasal prongs, or they may be like Graham's cannula. So any of these things can be used. And to deliver the breath, you can use any of the ventilator that is available, which is capable of doing IMV or synchronized manner. So what do you actually set? Pretty much what you set in invasive ventilation in IMV mode, you have to set here. So you will set a certain PEEP, usually which is like 5 or 6, and you would have a PIP, and generally this is 2 to 4 centimeter higher than what you would set in the conventional ventilation, and you would have a duration of inspiratory time, which will give you this PIP over that period of time, and then you would have a rate, and you would have to set a flow in some ventilators. Some ventilator will adjust the flow automatically. The flow that you set in non-invasive ventilation is generally higher than the conventional ventilation because of the variable leaks that happen through the circuits. So generally when you start, you would set PIP of 20, PWP of 5, rates of 40, I time of 0.5 seconds, and FiO2 as required. So in the initial phase, 20 by 5, rates 40, I time 0.5, and the flow, if you have to set a little higher flow because of the leaks, and you would do adjustment like you do in the IMV in increments of 1 to 2, and for the rates 2 to 5, and permissible maximum settings. Generally, you would require a PIP 2 to 4 centimeters above the conventional ventilation, and it is generally said that you don't have to worry about this higher pressure, because when actually the pressure reaches the pharynx, the levels of pressure starts to fall, and when it reaches the alveoli, it is even lower because you are having variable leaks at many places. When you wean, you would wean the PIP first, and you would not touch the rate. Once the PIPs come to something like 15, then you would start reducing the rate. And once you have reduced the rate to 15, then you may switch to the CPAP if they be stable for about say 6 to 12 hours. Now, when you're using synchronized nasal IPPV and you are using say different pressures of 10, 12, 14, the work of breathing is going to be lower at the higher pressure. So generally that is why we say that when you are using NIPPV, use higher pressure and not the lower pressure to take away the work of breathing for the baby. These are the 10 different randomized controlled trials from 1999 to 2016. Red bar represent the failure rate with CPAP, and green bar represents the failure rate with NIPPV, consistently across studies showing that NIPPV, the failure rates are lower. This bar gram actually shows the percentage BPD rate with CPAP in the red bars, and with NIPPV in green bars, and NIPPV with Ensure in the yellow bars, suggesting that CPAP is the highest rate of BPD, NIPPV the rates are lower, and if you combine surfactant and NIPPV, the rates are even lower for the occurrence of BPD. Then the question comes, how does this work in RDS, depending on what kind of NIPPV device you are using. So if it is ventilator generated, the RR is 0.63, confidence interval not crossing 1, number needed to treat is 13. So if you treat 13 subjects with NIPPV, instead of CPAP, you would have lower risk of running into failure. And whether you use synchronized form or non-synchronized form or mixed methods, it doesn't really matter. It would still have the benefits. There is less respiratory failure when you use NIPPV as compared to CPAP. In the armamentarium of the thing that you do antenatally in the delivery room and in the NICU to have good lungs in long run, you know that non-invasive ventilation as well as NIPPV are starting to play an extremely important role. So NIM is also not without problem. There are some issues that we need to keep in mind. The prongs can get obstructed. It can cause abdominal distension because of the large amount of gas flowing. It can cause air leak. It can cause GI perforation. There is a risk of infection. And there may be nosebleed or nasal irritation, irritation of the skin. And it can also cause pressure necrosis if it remains unmonitored. Now coming to what happens, what are the things that you can do to prevent failure of extubation. And in the old era, we used to do extubating to head box, but why now nobody do it, nobody does it. So we know that nasal CPAP versus head box, nasal CPAP is better. And nasal CPAP is equally effective like high flow when it comes to post-extubation support. Methylxanthine does the wonderful thing. And all of these NIPPV, when compared with varieties of things like nasal CPAP or BiPAP or synchronized form of NIPPV, the risk ratios are in favor of NIPPV. So NIPPV is superior to CPAP, and we should be using caffeine routinely in babies to prevent extubation failure, those who are ventilated. Now looking at the Cochrane review, when you use early nasal IPPV as compared to CPAP, so compared to CPAP, significant decrease in the need of invasive ventilation, RR of 0.44, most successful for improving extubation in preterm and the risk of developing chronic lung disease. Now, the results of this famous trial are the observations of this study are contrary to the Cochrane review, where babies who are less than 1 kilo, about 1,000 of them, were randomized to receive what they called as nasal IPPV and nasal CPAP, and then looked at the rate of chronic lung disease. It was similar in both the groups, 38.4 to 36.7%. Now, one of the criticism of this study is that what actually they called as nasal IPPV, some of the critics say that the pressure these studies used was something like PIP of 10, which should be more like CPAP or BiPAP and not really a IPPV. This remains one of the major criticism of this study. But I just wanted to show you, compared to Cochrane reviews, how the results of this large RCT are different. So this is my last slide and courtesy of Dr. Rishikesh Thakre. If you have a preterm baby and who is not extremely preterm, the first choice is CPAP. You should start early, and if baby is doing well, wean to room air. And if the criteria fulfilled, oxygen requirement more than 30%, then you can consider Ensure and Lisa, and baby does well, go to room air. If baby is not doing well and it fails, oxygen requirement goes above 60% or 70%, depending on your unit protocol, you can go to NIPPV. Now, there will be some group of babies who your device may be not available, or babies more than 28 weeks and good antenatal steroid coverage. You can consider high flow, but again, start early. If baby is doing well, wean to room air. If baby is not doing well, oxygen going more than 50%, go to CPAP. Those babies who fail CPAP and gone on to NIMV, we need to, those who do well, we could go to room air. Those who are not doing well and need rescue surfactant, you will get them intubate surfactant and start to do well, get to room air. And those who do not do well, then obviously they need to go for invasive ventilation. For every mode of support, there is a place. Although CPAP remains the standard of care, there will be certain number of babies, like 40% or so, who would fail this support, and there you can consider NIMV. And if those babies who fail NIMV, we may have to go for mechanical ventilation. So with this, I also had literature review found that Dr. Murki and Dr. Rajendra Prasad published a beautiful review, which is open publication. You can just get this downloaded from Indian Journal of Pediatrics. very well written, and a good resource to refer to. With that, I end my talk. Thank you.
Excellent talk, sir. Sunil here. Uh, you have covered non-invasive ventilation HFNC and non-invasive ventilation very well. There are only two questions, sir, here for you. One is, can we use NIPPV to wean preterms from invasive ventilation?
Uh, it really depends on the comfort levels, and occasionally in our unit we use when babies get stuck on invasive ventilation and the drive does not seem good, but babies otherwise well, we can try as a bridging gap between CPAP and invasive ventilation.
Same question she's asking, any protocol for weaning from CPAP to room air?
So there are several criterias, and one of the most famous one are Cicada criterias. Now, if you are working in the Western countries, there they don't do any weaning, good weaning. They would get baby into the room air and keep CPAP somewhere between 5 to 7 until about 32 weeks, and after which one of the thing is whether you do direct taking of the CPAP or do 1 hour, do 2 hours, do 3 hours, something like that. It's just trial and error. So you have to develop a protocol and consistently follow that. In our unit, we continue CPAP support uh, until at least 32 weeks. And after that, depending on baby's tolerance, we try 1 hour off and 5 hours on, 1 or 2 days, and then 2 hours, and then 3 hours, and then try completely off. Those babies who have just small amount of oxygen requirement, there we do blended air oxygen, but those who have respiratory distress, then better to put them on CPAP.
Dr. Anita is asking about weaning protocol for NIV.
So basically, first thing first, we need to see that the primary respiratory problem is solved, whether it is RDS or apnea, etc., etc. Once that is solved, as it said that PIP would decrease by 1 or 2 centimeters in a day and then go from say 20 to 19, 18, 17, 16, 15. And simultaneously by monitoring oxygen level, you would get down to FiO2 of maybe somewhere around 25-30% or room air depending on what the baby tolerates. Once your PIP is been brought down to 15, then you'll start winning the rate from 40 to 35 to 30, 12 hourly or 24 hourly, and go down to the rates of 15, and then just simply switch over to CPAP.
Dr. Prashant is asking about, could you please explain why changing to NIMV is better than going up to PEEP of 8? Increasing MAP, how it is beneficial?
Okay, so we know that, like, when Grigori actually started using CPAP, endotracheal CPAP, the CPAP level used were as high as 10, 11, 12. In our unit, we use PEEP as high as 9 without any problems. Only when they fail that level, then we go for invasive ventilation. Now, whenever you increase the PPAP, you know that you are directly increasing the FRSC and improving the oxygenation.